Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time, Masechet Sanhedrin. This is our 11th class, and today we are going to be reviewing Daf 72 to 78. We're continuing discussing the rebellious son, the Ben Sorer Umoreh, and the Mishnah tells us at the bottom of Daf 71 that we judge the rebellious son based on what we think is going to happen in his future, as opposed to what he is doing now. And the Mishnah says it's better that he should die innocent than to die when he's guilty, which I think is a very interesting concept. And generally, we do not say that that's what we, that that's how we judge. But the Gemara seems to say, the Mishnah says that for this case, and we'll see one other case, we do the same thing. Okay. 1 second. Okay. So the Gemara says that, the Mishnah continues that death is beneficial to the evil people because it stops them from sinning more. And death is bad for tzaddikim, for righteous people, because it prevents them from doing more mitzvot. And since we're talking about what's good and what's bad, the Gemara tells us that wine and sleep are good for evil people, but bad for righteous people. And sometimes the larger the group, the more evil they can do. And therefore, it's better to disperse these people, right, evil people, so that they don't, right, the Mishnah understood the concept of peer pressure. But for tzaddikim, right, for righteous people, it's good to be assembled. It's good to be together. They get strength from one another. And the same thing with sheket, with tranquility, is good for righteous people, and it's bad for evil people. So now the Gemara on Daf 72 tells us that the Torah assumes that in the end, what's going to happen to this rebellious son? In the end, he's going to steal all of his parents' money, and then he's going to want more money. So he's going to end up going out and robbing people. And when that doesn't work, he might even come to kill people, right? And therefore, he is killed now. And we don't wait till it becomes too late. The next Mishnah is a very famous concept. In Hebrew, it's called haba b'machteret, which means someone who sneaks into, right? Literally, it means tunnels into someone else's house in order to steal something. The idea is that this burglar is taking his life into his own hands, and therefore he also is judged on what is potentially going to happen in his future. And therefore, you, being the homeowner, is allowed to kill this burglar, even though he hasn't done anything yet. Meaning, even though he hasn't killed anyone, even though he hasn't said, like, give me all your money or I'm going to kill you, as soon as he sneaks into the house, the assumption is that he is ready to take a life, and therefore you're allowed to kill him before he does. If he breaks something as he's coming into your house, so then he cannot be killed because he's actually liable for the damage that he did. But if you can kill him, meaning depending on the circumstance, basically either you can kill him or he's liable for damage. You can't have both. Okay, so now the Gemara explains that this person, the Baba Machteret, is ready to kill when he comes to steal this object, and therefore he can be killed. Right, the the sentence or the principle is, right, if someone is coming to kill you, you're allowed to kill them first, right? In Hebrew, it's imba lehargecha. If someone's coming to kill you, hashkem lehargo, you're allowed to kill them before they try to kill you. Now, let's say the person broke in and stole an item. So they actually don't need to return the item because he was subject to being killed at that time, and therefore he does not need to return the item, meaning we don't have a capital offense and damages. The Gemara says no, if he broke it, he doesn't have to pay for damages. But if he stole it, so then he needs to return it. Or another opinion is he does not need to return it because it becomes his when he leaves the house with it. Or no, it doesn't become his, and therefore he needs to return it. Even if he unintentionally breaks a barrel, so he has to pay if, again, as we said, he's not liable for death. Like when for sure he wouldn't kill someone, meaning let's say it's a father and a son, right? So let's say the son is breaking into the father's house. You know he's not going to kill the father, and he just wants the money. Therefore, because you know he's not going to kill the homeowner, he is not liable for death. And therefore, when he breaks something, he needs to pay for it. And if he steals it, he needs to return it. Okay, let's say a person, and since we're talking about being liable for two things at the same time, meaning liable for stealing or damaging at the same time that there's potential that you might kill someone, right? We have the concept called kimle midiraba mine, which means that if you are liable for two punishments at the same time, you only get the more severe punishment and you don't get the lesser punishment. So we have another example of this. Let's say a person steals on Shabbat and he carries it out, right? So he is transgressing Shabbat and he is stealing. So because he's liable for both, because now in this case he is liable for both things because it didn't happen simultaneously, meaning first he stole something and then he walked out of the house and he transgressed by carrying the object into the public domain. However, if he dragged it out, so then he's exempt because the same time that he transgressed for Shabbat, he also transgressed for stealing. Okay, then we have a story. A person stole rams from a Rava, and then when he tried to return it, he didn't accept them back because he said, you acquired them when you stole them. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, as we said, if it's clear that he could kill you, so then you're allowed to kill him first. But if it's clear that he would not kill you, so then you cannot kill him, right? As we said, a son, actually it's interesting, the Gemara says it differently than what I said before. The Gemara says a son assumes the father wouldn't kill him, but the father, unfortunately, interestingly, this is how the Gemara sees it, but the father can't assume that the son won't kill him, right? Let's say if you know the person loves you, you can't kill him because he wouldn't kill you. And you can kill him either, whether it's during the week or it's on Shabbat. You can also kill this person in any way, right? You might have thought only the homeowner is allowed to kill him, right? Because he is what's called a rodef, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Rodef means, right, someone who's chasing you to kill you. If anyone sees a rodef, they are allowed to kill him. It doesn't have to be that the victim is the one the only one that can kill him. Anybody who sees this happening can also kill him. And we said, because the verse says mot yumat, meaning he will get killed or he will die, means you can kill him in any way. It doesn't matter. We said he's called ba b'machteret, which literally means he comes through a tunnel. So what does that mean? If he, basically any way that he sneaks into the house is a problem, right? If most robbers tunnel in, and that's why they use the case of tunnels, or maybe if he tunnels in, you don't need to warn him, but if he comes in another way, maybe then you need to warn him. A rodef, as we said, rodef means someone is, it literally means chasing after you, right? If someone is chasing after you to try to kill you, you do not need to say, stop right there, or I'm going to shoot, right? You can actually just shoot. You do not need to warn him. The Gemara now goes into, I would say, a very maybe sensitive discussion, which is, right, if a mother is giving birth, and sometimes we see, right, if as she's giving birth, the baby is threatening the mother's life. The question is the baby seen as a rodef, right? Is the infant, the fetus, right, running after or trying to kill the mother, and therefore there would be consequences. So the Gemara says, now it's a much more complicated case, but I'll read you what the Gemara says. Obviously, there's a much longer conversation for what is the exact halacha, but the Gemara says that if the mother is giving birth, if the baby's head came out already, you cannot kill the baby to save the mother. It's not seen as a rodef because it's already seen as a living human being, right? And it's part of natural childbirth, and therefore you cannot kill the baby to save the mother. Now, again, as I said, halacha, the actual halacha is much more detailed and much more nuanced. So we can discuss that later or another time. Okay, if a person is chasing another person, so the Gemara says you should try to stop him in a different way, meaning don't shoot for the heart, right? Aim for something else. But if they don't listen, then you can kill him. As we said, you do not need a warning. If you tell him, don't do this, and he says, I'm going to do it anyway, so then he is liable. Daf 73. So now we're going to have the next Mishnah, that there are people, right, the following people, there are people who can be killed in order to save others. And this is what we just mentioned before, the rodef. You can, right, the person who's running after someone to kill him, you can kill him in order to stop him from killing someone else. Or maybe it's a person who is trying to sodomize a man, or someone who is going to violate what's called a na'arat me'urasa, a girl who is engaged. If the person is running after an animal, or to transgress Shabbat, or to do idolatry, you cannot kill them to prevent them from sinning, right? So again, if you think about the Mishnah that we had beforehand, there were specific cases where we are allowed to kill the person to prevent them from sinning, but those are the only cases. And in these cases, again, only in these two cases can you stop them, or three cases can you stop them. For other transgressions, you cannot stop the person to prevent them from sinning. So now the Gemara explains. The verse teaches, right, lo ta'amod al dam re'echa, right, you should not stand idly by while your friend is going to get killed, and therefore you need to stop the assailant, or this verse teaches us that you need to save a person, right? If you are walking down the street and you see someone drowning, you need to stop and save them as well. Or we learn it from the Na'ara Me'urasa, right? That we can stop someone from violating her by killing him. Therefore, if he wants to kill somebody, then obviously we can stop him from killing someone. Okay, it says for the engaged girl who is being violated, it says ve'ein moshia la. There's no one to save her, right? Therefore, if there is someone there to save her, you're allowed to save her, right? You can kill him in order to save her. It says then that we also have to save a life. And therefore, right, even if you have to hire someone to save a person, you are allowed to do that. Right, let's say a person is chasing a woman to sleep with her, and the prohibition to sleep with her is a capital punishment or karet, then you're allowed to kill him. But if it's a lower level, then you can't. If he already violated her, you cannot kill him. You cannot kill him afterwards. And if she says, don't kill him so that he won't kill her, we actually listen to her. Now, again, I think that some of these things are very complicated and very difficult. So I think, again, some of these things are a little hard to understand. We said that you're not allowed to stop someone from worshiping idolatry. Another opinion is you can stop him from going to worship idols, and you can maybe even stop someone to go who's going to transgress the Shabbat. Okay. The Gemara says that the Torah doesn't want her to be violated, but if she says, don't kill him, we listen to her. Or there's another opinion that says, no, we don't listen to her and we save her anyway. Again, I think a very important voice in the Gemara. Okay, because okay, then the Gemara says maybe there are different cases here, right? Maybe right on Daf 74, if he seduced her, right, as opposed to raping her, if he seduced her, you cannot kill. You cannot kill, and if you can save the person by harming the person without killing them, that is better, and you should not kill him anyway. Let's say you see the Torah describes the following case, right? There are two men fighting, and they, instead of harming each other, they harm a pregnant woman who just happens to be standing there, and she miscarries. You have to compensate her for her loss, right? This is because they didn't kill her, right? It's two separate liabilities. If, right, we were talking about someone chasing someone else to kill him, if the person chasing broke some vessels on the way, he's exempt from paying for the damages. Again, as we said before, because that person is liable for their life, right? They are liable to be executed or killed. Therefore, they are not liable to pay damages. If the person, right, the victim, breaks some vessels as he's running away, if he breaks the right, we'll say if he breaks the person who's trying to kill him's things, so then he's exempt. He doesn't have to pay. But if he breaks someone else's things, he is liable. The Gemara teaches that you're not allowed to save yourself with someone else's money or someone else's property. One could say you can save yourself, but then you are liable to pay for those damages. Let's say a third person starts chasing after them to save the first person from the second person, if the third person breaks something while chasing the other person, so then he is exempt. And this is the Gemara's way of encouraging people to get involved, right? If you're going to say, oh, no, you're going to have to pay for anything that you broke on the way when you're saving someone else, you'd say like, oh, why should I get involved? I don't want to get involved. I don't want to pay anything, right, for damages. The Gemara says, no, you're exempt. You don't have to pay for any damages, and therefore go save the other person. Okay, right? And here we have a very famous Gemara, right? If a person says, I'm going to kill you unless you transgress a certain mitzvah, so then the person should transgress it and not be killed, right? We have a very famous verse, right? The Torah says, V'chai bahem, right? The Torah is meant, we are meant to live by the mitzvot, right? And not die for not doing the mitzvot. And therefore you should transgress and not get killed, except for what we call, right, the three cardinal sins, right? Murder, right? Shvichut damim, gilui arayot, which is forbidden relationships, and idolatry, avodah zarah, right? These three things. If someone says, if you don't kill so and so, I'm going to kill you, you need to let yourself be killed and not kill the other person. The Gemara now says maybe it's different if this is done in public. Maybe you have more of a responsibility to not transgress, maybe other mitzvot. It is what's called a chilul Hashem, right? You are desecrating the name of God if it's something in public. The Gemara says, right, we all know the very famous verse in Shema, Ve'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha bechol levavcha ubechol nafshecha ubechol meodecha, right? We have to love God with all of our heart, all of our soul, and everything that we have. And it's important to recognize that, right, the Gemara explains that sometimes we have to give up our life to show that we love Hashem. Right, so the verse teaches that these three are what's called, as Zohar wrote here in the chat, right, Yehareg ve'al ya'avor, right? It is better to be killed and not to transgress these three mitzvot. Right, so a person was told to kill so-and-so to save his life, and the Gemara very famously says, who says that your blood is redder than his, right? Why should you kill someone to save your own life? Someone is still going to end up dead. Who says that person is worse than you or better than you, right? Meaning you can't say that, and therefore you are not allowed to take the other person's life. Maybe it's during a time of persecution when there were decrees that even a small mitzvah, you need to sacrifice your life and not do even a small mitzvah. Or the Gemara says, no, maybe in private you can do the sin, but in public, even a small mitzvah, you need to give up your life for, even to change your shoelaces, which was just a custom. What does it mean in public? In public means more than 10 Jews. We learn this from the pasuk v'nikdashti betoch b'nei Yisrael. God is going to be sanctified within b'nei Yisrael, within the nation of Israel. And because we have the words betoch, it takes us to the spies, where we have the word edah. Edah means 10 men, right? So if there are 10 Jews, that is called a public thing. The Gemara says, wait a minute, you're saying that you're not allowed to do, you're not allowed to have for forbidden relations. But the Gemara says, very appropriate to this next week, right? But what about Esther? Esther slept with Achashverosh, and everybody knew about it. It was something very public, and she shouldn't have slept with him. The Gemara says, no, she was passive, right? The line, Esther Karkat Olam, right? She was like the ground. She was passive, and therefore she didn't have to give up her life. The Gemara says, no, right? Maybe this is not because he was not Jewish, maybe she did not have to give up her life for this. The Gemara has another story of a non-Jew who wanted a Jew to cut the grass to give to his animal. So if that's the case, you can do it because he's getting benefit. But if he says, you better cut down this grass and then throw it in the garbage, it's a proof that he's just trying to get him to desecrate the Shabbat, and therefore you should not do it. Now the Gemara asks, does a non-Jew need to give up his life for the 7 mitzvot that a non-Jew is obligated to do? So the Gemara brings the story of Ne'eman. He was not Jewish, and he was healed by Elisha. And Elisha told him, go back to, go in peace and go back to where you came from. And he knew that he was going to have to bow down to an idol. So the Gemara says, maybe it shows you don't have to give up your life. The Gemara says, no, maybe that's because it was in private. But if it was in public, he would need to give up his life. The Gemara has another interesting story about a man who became sick after seeing this woman, and the doctor said the only way for him to get better is for him to have relations with her. The rabbi said it's better for him to die than to sleep with her. So they said, okay, maybe she could just stand in front of him, or maybe she could just speak to him from behind a wall. And the rabbi said, no, he should die and not degrade her. The machloket is if she was actually a married woman or was she a single woman. But either way, the Gemara said it would lead to inappropriate behavior, and that really he would never be satisfied, and therefore he should, we should not give in to his desires, and we are not allowed to disgrace this woman. Okay, this is the end of the 8th chapter. Now we're going to begin the 9th chapter. The Mishnah on the top of 75. We already did stoning. So now we're going to talk about people who get burning, a person who has relations with his mother, a person who has relations with a mother and a daughter, or any illicit relations, and a daughter of a Kohen who committed adultery gets sreifa. What does it mean, a woman and her daughter? It includes any daughter or granddaughter or daughter of his wife or his mother-in-law. So now we're going to go into forbidden relationships and how we know they are forbidden and which ones are permitted. So the Gemara explains, when we say that he sleeps with a mother and her daughter, one opinion is that both of them are forbidden. Or maybe it's that, what does it mean both of them are forbidden? Maybe he slept with his mother-in-law and her mother, and those are both forbidden relations. The verse says, and them. What does that mean? It includes the mother-in-law, or maybe it means both of them, the mother-in-law and her mother, or maybe it means the mother-in-law and the wife. So what does it mean? Right? The woman and her mother, they get sreifa, which is burning. We include all the subcategories of forbidden relationships. Males are like females, meaning the son's daughter and the daughter's daughter are both forbidden, and the mother of the mother-in-law and the mother of the father-in-law are also all forbidden. And now we have a what's called a gzeira shava, which means that certain words are similar in different verses, and therefore those verses are comparable. And therefore we see that just like we have, just like her relatives are um, are forbidden, so too his relatives are forbidden. So, and then the Gemara says, so we're going to compare her relatives and his relatives, meaning the person himself, his relatives, and his wife's relatives are going to be compared, and we're going to compare below meaning daughter, granddaughter, to above, meaning mother, grandmother. And so therefore we have, right, daughter, granddaughter, and mother-in-law and mother. So the Gemara says we actually have 3 generations above. We have the wife, her mother, and her grandmother, right? The same thing, it goes down, his wife, his daughter, his granddaughter, right? So too, maybe all of their punishments are srifa, right, are burning. Or maybe it means, right, if you compare these, so maybe it's a lesser prohibition, right? So granddaughter might get the same punishment as the one above, which is burning. So the verse says, imcha hi, right? She is your mother. So a person is only forbidden to be with his mother, but not his grandmother. Again, it's forbidden on a different level, but again, it's not on this level. Okay, we now have 2 principles that we use to understand different verses. We have a concept of learning from one, let's say, from one category to another, right? So if you have a gzeira shava, or right, if we're going to learn from one category to another, there's 2 ways to interpret it. Either we say we're going to learn from one category to another and keep it as the same punishment, or we're going to say we're going to learn one from the other that it's forbidden, but we're not going to keep the same punishment. We're going to have a different punishment. So those are 2 ways to understand these like relationships, and it's going to affect what the punishment is going to be. So as we said, we learn grandmother from grandmother-in-law, and therefore maybe it's the same punishment, which is srifa, which is burning. But right, if her mother or her mother-in-law, sorry, if her mother or her grandmother is srifa, but his mother is stoning, is skila, so how could it be that the grandmother, right, the grandmother is burning, is one punishment, and the other one is a different punishment? So therefore this doesn't work, and therefore we see that grandmother having relations with the grandmother isn't as we said, isn't a biblical prohibition. It's a different type of it's still a prohibition, but it's a different level of prohibition, right? Grandmother-in-law is forbidden, therefore maybe grandmother is also forbidden, but again, the punishment doesn't line up, right? And therefore, as we said, the grandmother isn't forbidden on this biblical level. Okay, Daf 76. A man can marry his daughter-in-law from his wife, meaning a man marries a woman and she already has a son, and that son is married to a woman. When that son dies, the again, the stepfather-in-law is allowed to marry that woman. You might have thought that it's prohibited because of the wife of his son, right? His daughter-in-law is forbidden to him, but his wife's daughter-in-law is permitted to him. Now, again, we're going to do the same thing that we just did with the grandmother. Maybe we should say that she is also forbidden, but the punishment doesn't work out. And therefore, in the end, we're going to say that there is no prohibition for that relationship. Right? So you might have thought that it would be forbidden because of the wife of his son, meaning his daughter-in-law. But, right, again, now go up, right? If he sleeps with his mother, they get stoning, which is different than his mother-in-law, which is srifa, which is burning. And therefore, since those punishments are different, you can't learn from the man's relations or relatives to the wife's relatives. Because there is a different punishment, we can't learn one from the other. Okay. We also learn that he is not allowed to sleep with a daughter, right? His daughter, but the daughter not from a wife, but from a woman that he violated. There is still a prohibition to sleep with her, even though he's not married to the mother. If he sleeps with her, then he gets sreifa, he gets burnt. If he sleeps with his granddaughter, also sreifa, right, burning. And a man, right, again, with the daughter from rape, both of them get sreifa, as we just said. Okay, next verse. The verse says, do not profane your daughter and make her into a harlot. This teaches that, right, what does it mean to profane your daughter? So one opinion is he's not allowed to sleep with his daughter. The Gemara says, no, another opinion is it's talking about giving your daughter over to a man to have relations with her for not for the purpose of marriage. Maybe the verse teaches both of those things as well. Another opinion is that verse is teaching that you're not allowed to marry off your daughter to an elderly man. This will cause her to have an affair because he won't have any interest in her. She will want kids and he won't want any kids. Another opinion is that the verse is talking about a person who holds back his daughter from getting married because he's very comfortable having his unmarried daughter living in his house and taking care of him. The Gemara calls this person a poor man who is a scheming rasha. He's a scheming evil person because he's not letting his daughter get married. The Gemara says, be careful of people who give you advice that's self-serving. It's not really connected to what we were just saying, but it's a very good advice anyway. The Gemara says that it's a problem to marry off your daughter to a minor, but it's good to marry your daughter off to someone who is about to become an adult, right? If they're close to maturity, to puberty or maturity, then it is okay. The Gemara says that you should love your neighbors and draw your relatives close. And now we go on to the next Mishnah. Again, I think I said this in the beginning, but I don't want to say that I'm reading these Mishnayot or teaching this in an insensitive way, but I'm kind of teaching it straight because I think there's a lot here. We can maybe discuss it a little bit more at the end. So I'm just gonna teach it, and then we can discuss in a little bit. The next Mishnah teaches about beheading, which is called saif or hereg. Who gets this? A person who murders, and the people of what's called the Ir Nidachat. Ir Nidachat is a city where a majority of the people worship idols. Okay, so since we mentioned murder, what does this mean? Someone who murders. What does that mean? He killed a person either with a stone, or he drowned someone, or maybe he burned someone. He is then liable for execution. But if the person could have come out of the water or the fire by themselves, so then he's exempt from this capital punishment. Meaning, if a person threw someone into a burning building, but the person could have walked out of the building, meaning the door was open and he could have walked out, he would not be liable. Then, okay, let's say he sent a snake or a dog after a person and they killed the person. He is exempt because he did not directly cause the death. If he held a snake and he got it to bite the person, then he would be liable, or even in that case, he would be exempt. So what does this mean? So the Gemara says, first of all, it's important to recognize that iron, again, don't forget this is written 2,000 years ago, but the Gemara says, right, iron, even the smallest amount is dangerous, and therefore he would be liable even with the smallest amount of iron. But with a stone or wood, it would have to be a certain measurement. If it was smaller, maybe he would not be liable for capital punishment. So now the Gemara explains what we just mentioned. Even if the person didn't push the victim, but he prevented him from escaping, right? So let's say, again, to be a little graphic, right? A person trips and falls into a burning building. If a person held the door closed, he would be liable for the death penalty. And the opposite is also true, meaning even if he pushed him into a burning building, but the door was open and he could have escaped, and the person died, the person would not be liable for capital punishment. If a person prevented someone's animal from escaping the sun and it died, he is liable to pay damages, or maybe he is exempt because he didn't cause it directly. Daf 77, maybe he's exempt because, right, you're only exempt with a person, but you would be liable for damages. Let's say a person tied someone up and he died of starvation. He's exempt because, again, exempt doesn't mean it's great and you can do it. It's obviously terrible and there would be a punishment, but the punishment is not beheading. So just to be clear, when I say exempt, it means exempt of capital punishment. So what's the case here? You tied someone up and they died of starvation. The fatal force didn't exist when you tied him up, meaning you tied him up. He wasn't going to die in that moment. He died of a different reason. If you tied him up in the sun or in the cold and he died, then you're liable because the danger already existed. But if the sun wasn't up yet or it wasn't cold yet, so then you would be exempt. Right? Let's say you tied the person up in front of a lion. You would also be exempt because really you would have died anyway because you can't really outrun a lion. Let's say you tied him up in front of gnats, right, or mosquitoes or something like that. You would be liable because he could have fended them off, but he couldn't do it because he was tied up. Let's say you put someone in a barrel and he suffocated, or you opened a hole over a sleeping person and they died of exposure. You are liable. Again, seems to be, right, you directly caused their death, or maybe you're exempt because it wasn't really the direct cause of death. We said, let's say you pushed someone into a pit and there was a ladder there when you pushed him in. So then if someone removes the ladder, right, so the original person is exempt because at the time he pushed him in, he could have come out. Let's say a person shot an arrow at another person who was holding a shield. Now, even if another person comes and takes away the shield, it's one that could have cured him, and the have bought medicine in the marketplace, you would also be exempt as well. Let's say a person threw a stone at a wall and it bounced off and killed somebody else, you're liable. The Gemara says it's just like a this game that they used to play with throwing a ball at a wall, which I think we have nowadays as well. Right, so kind of like I forgot what it's called, where right you throw it against the wall and then you hit it. So almost like a racquetball, but without the rackets. So if it killed a person on purpose, no, dodgeball doesn't have a wall though. It does it? I don't know. Anyway, if the ball, yeah. If you killed someone on purpose, then you're liable for death. And if it was accidental, he goes to the city of refuge, to the Ir Miklat. You're liable, even though, right? Maybe it wasn't what you meant to do. So the Gemara says you're only liable if the victim was standing further than 4 amot from the wall. But if they were closer, so then you are exempt because they were too close and they should have been standing that close. This
Lost you, Rabbanit. Can you hear us? Audio and video is gone.
Okay, we are back. I paused the recording. Okay, so, all right. Did you hear about the ball? We heard the ball bouncing off the wall, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's talk more about direct versus indirect. So let's say a person throws a stone up in the air and it falls sideways and kills someone. You're liable because you're the one who threw it up. Daf 78 says, let's say, this is actually a very challenging example, but the Gemara, again, I also want to say that I think a lot of these examples are seen as theoretical, not practical. But the case is, let's say 10 people hit one person and the person died. So maybe, right, they do it all at the same time or one after the other. They're all exempt from capital punishment because we don't know which one caused the death. Or another opinion is, no, the last one that does it is the one that's liable because that's the one that killed the person. So they both understand it from the same verse. right? It says kol nefesh, right? All, right, the whole or all of the soul, right? So you're only liable if one person caused the death, or it means anyone who caused the death. From here, the Gemara talks about what if you, right? What if a person kills somebody who's going to die anyway? Maybe they are exempt, but if you kill a person who's dying from natural causes, right? The Gemara makes a distinction between what's called a treifa, which means a person who is injured in a certain way and therefore they're going to die, meaning man-made, man-caused, as opposed to someone who is dying from natural causes. You are not allowed to kill that person, right? And that's where euthanasia comes in. In this Gemara, it's seen as killing. Okay, right, and then there's then the Gemara says, let's say a person struck someone, and then another person comes and kills them. The second one is liable, even if the person would have died from the first injury, because the second person actually caused the death, that person is liable. Since we mentioned the treifa, again, a treifa is a person who, because of an injury, they are going to die. So if a treifa kills a person in front of the court, so then he's liable. But if it's not in front of them, he is not liable. If a person, right, so again, if a person sodomized this person who's going to die, they are liable. But if he sodomized someone else, again, if it's in front of the court, in front of judges, he is liable. But if not, then he is not. The same thing with an ox that is going to die. If he killed someone, the ox is liable, right, and put to death. And so to an ox of somebody who is going to die and if he kills someone, he's exempt because the owner isn't subject to execution. We had mentioned the snake. So the Gemara says that there's a machloket. I think it's just interesting in terms of just anatomy. Is when you take a snake and you take its fangs and you put it on someone's, body, is it that, it's almost like a smoking gun, right? The venom is there and you're basically putting the venom into the person, just using the fangs, as a means, as a way to do that? Or does the snake have control of, right, putting out the venom? And therefore, even if you put the fangs into the person, it's actually the snake that killed the person and not, the person who did it. And that's a machloket. Okay, last Mishnah for today. Let's say a person hits someone with a stone or a fist, and the judges determine that he's going to die from the injury, but then the person recovers and then he dies. So the person is liable for capital punishment because the assessment was that this person was going to die. Or maybe the person is exempt because maybe when they die eventually, it's not from the original injury. The Gemara explains that this is based on a verse that we actually incarcerate a person, which is interesting because we don't really hear about incarceration, right? Putting someone in jail, we don't really see that. But the Gemara says we put someone in jail till the victim dies or recovers, because we want to see, right, is the person going to die or recover? And this we learn it from Moshe and the person who transgresses Shabbat, the Mikoshesh, he goes out and collects wood, or from the person who blasphemes God. And it says that if the person recovers, again, we assess to see how much the person, right, if the person recovers, then the person has to pay, the perpetrator needs to pay damages, as opposed to if he dies, he is liable for capital punishment. Okay, with that, we are going to end for today, and we will pick it up with some more death and dying next week. I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has for the next few minutes. Sorry about the internet bad connection. Yeah.
Yes, I have one that just popped out. It was in the weeds on DOF 76. And they're talking about the wicked person and talks about what he might do with his daughter and all the problems in two different ways that could go wrong. And then the third one, or he returns an article to a lost article to an idolater. And then there's this long discussion in the Art Scroll version to explain why that's so bad. And it was fascinating. Yes, it's a Torah commandment and it must be done for another Jew, and it's very precious to us and we're very careful. But of course, it's just the way it's described there about how horrible a sin it would be to do such a thing to an idolater and what'll happen to you and whatever. And when I get done reading about all the explanation, and then I'm thinking to myself, how do I know who an idolater is? I mean, everybody's, like in Purim, but everybody's cloaked and disguised, and I don't know what's going on with people. And a Jew could be an idolater in hiding as much as anyone else, and nobody's got signs on them. And I just want to return lost items, and that happens a lot in the community. But it's a mixed community, and so that would be my question. Just do I need to pull in my sensitivity to perform that mitzvah? Do I need to be concerned? How do I know who an idolater is?
Okay, great question. So first of all, again, I'm not a rabbi, but I think that if you can return a lost item, you should return the lost item. I think that the Gemara is speaking about a time where there's a lot of tension between the Jews and the non-Jews, especially throughout the different generations of the Mishnah and the Gemara. A lot of the non-Jewish neighbors were really trying to kill the Jews. And if they weren't trying to kill the Jews, they were trying to convert the Jews. So I think the rabbis were trying to maintain a distance between the Jews and the non-Jews. Nowadays, I think that many of us, again, not all of us, but many of us are living in a world, in the modern world, where we interact with many different types of people. And later on in a different Gemara, we talk about we don't want to cause any hatred. So therefore, if returning an object or doing a certain thing for a non-Jew would, the opposite, right, would not cause hatred, so then you should do that, right? If it's going to cause hatred, then don't do it. Meaning, I think we're living in a different society, and therefore I would say it's good to be kind to all people. It's good to return lost items to anybody you can. That's what I would say. But I'm not a rabbi, so I'm not giving you an actual legal answer, but in my personal sensitivities, that's what I would answer.
Yeah, I thank you so much. The Art Scroll goes on to go into the interior and speak about what is your motivation. And it comes down so hard on the idea that you just want to be nice. Right. And that basically doing the same thing for an idolater just gives you satisfaction that you were nice, but you're not doing it because to fulfill a mitzvah or the fear of God or to love your fellow Jew, and so that's where they really zinged in. And then it became, wow, that's kind of scary because, I could see myself in that situation, feeling like that, but that's considered very sinful.
Yeah,
I wanted to elaborate on what Rabbanit said, that it would be a Kiddush Hashem if you did something that even if you were not obligated, I think it would be a reflection on Am Yisrael that they are a kind people
Amen.
and honest people, etc., etc.
Amen. Amen.
Great, great. Thank you. Any other thoughts, comments? Again, I think that these are challenging discussions. I got an email, that some people were, I don't know if the word was offended, but I think that these are challenging dapim, and I think that it is important to put these topics or themes into context. Right. So in a time where there was capital punishment, right? Think about the time of the Romans, what that capital punishment was. It was much worse than the things that we're describing now. So I think that to our morals, our modern sensitivities, these things seem very violent, very terrible. If you put things in perspective or context, I think they're seen as very merciful. And the last thing I just wanted to say is we are discussing all of these cases, but the question is, how often did these things actually happen? We don't really know, as we've mentioned before, right? We talked about the rebellious child and all the details, and then it said it never happened. So again, I just want to put that in context. That I know that we're learning a lot of these intricate details, and some of it rubs us the wrong way. It is important to recognize maybe they weren't ever carried out. As we're going to see, like these dapim, we were talking about how do you construct a case where a murderer is liable for capital punishment. It's something very specific. Again, it doesn't mean you can go around killing people. It just means that they'll get a different punishment. So I just wanted to put all of those things out there. And Be'ezrat Hashem, may we only hear good news. And just if those of you who remember when we learned Masachet Megillah, right? So a lot of the things that we learned are coming up. This week is Parshat Zachor, and we have Ta'anit Esther next week, and then Purim. So all the laws that we did learn, I mean, it's been a while, but we did learn them in the past. So hopefully you'll remember them for next week for Purim. Okay, wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom.
Okay. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Have a great week.